The Dutton legacy is not ending, it's transforming. When fans thought Yellowstone had given us every twist, every heartbreak, and every frontier battle, Taylor Sheridan proves once again that the story of the American West still has more to tell. Rio Palo is not just another spinoff. It's the next chapter in a saga that has already redefined modern television. The first trailer has arrived, and it's already clear this series is going to stand tall on its own while carrying the same fire, grit, and emotional punch that Yellowstone fans crave. Asterisk, the name itself feels powerful. Rio Palo. Translated from Spanish, it suggests river of the stick or wood river, a name steeped in imagery. Right away, it signals that water and land too, forces that have always defined Western survival, will play a central role in this story. Just like Yellowstone's Montana wilderness became a character of its own, Rio Palo introduces us to a setting that's both harsh and breathtaking, a place where the land can give life, but also take it away. From the trailer, we see sprawling valleys, endless stretches of desert plains, and a river that cuts through the heart of it all, as if it holds the history of every life that has passed along its banks. This spin-off sets itself apart geographically. While Yellowstone's main story unfolded in Montana's rugged mountains, Rio Palo takes us further south, where the landscape shifts from icy peaks to dry, unforgiving terrain. The trailer shows wide shots drenched in golden light, cattle drives moving across dusty horizons, and ranch houses built under the weight of unforgiving heat. It feels rawer, rougher, and more dangerous. And that tells us one thing: this is going to be a story about survival in a land that takes no pity on the weak. But where does Rio Palo fall in the Yellowstone timeline? That's one of the biggest questions fans are asking. The trailer doesn't give a direct answer, but sharp-eyed viewers will notice subtle hints. There's no trace of the modern technology we see in Yellowstone's present-day battles, yet it doesn't feel as far back as 1883. The clothes, the weapons, and the ranching style suggest a period somewhere between the early 1900s and mid-century America. This timeline would make Rio Palo an untold chapter, possibly running parallel to 1923, or perhaps filling in the space between that show and the modern Yellowstone we know. The tone of the trailer speaks volumes. It doesn't just give us action shots or pretty landscapes. Instead, it sets a mood intense, heavy, and filled with unspoken tension. Horses charge across rivers, men shout over cattle in chaos, and there are quick flashes of violence. Gun barrels raised, fists clenched, and faces that tell stories of pain, betrayal, and survival. Unlike Yellowstone's familiar ranch wars, this looks more primal. The land itself seems to be a force that characters are constantly at war with, as much as they are with each other. And then there's the question of identity. Every Yellowstone spin-off so far has carried a strong theme of family legacy. 1883 was about beginnings, 1923 about survival through history's hardest years, and 6666 about modern ranching grit. Rio Palo, judging from its trailer, feels like a story about outsiders. It hints at people caught between two-world settlers and natives, ranchers and farmers, survivalists and dreamers. The land belongs to no one, yet everyone is fighting to claim a piece of it. That conflict, combined with the harsh setting, may define Rio Palo as the most unforgiving story Sheridan has told yet. What really stands out is how Rio Palo establishes itself as both connected to Yellowstone and completely new. The trailer doesn't lean on familiar Dutton faces to grab our attention. Instead, it says, here's a new frontier, here are new families, and here's a battle that may not be about inheritance, but about existence itself. This is bold because it proves that the Yellowstone universe isn't just about the Dutton name, it's about the West, its struggles, and its endless ability to test the people who try to tame it. The first look makes it clear Rio Palo is more than just a side story. It's a reimagining of the Western itself, with its blazing sun, shadowy violence, and landscapes that dare its characters to survive another day. It feels like Taylor Sheridan is pulling us deeper into the roots of what makes this universe so addictive. Just like Yellowstone shocked audiences by mixing family drama with Western grit, Rio Palo looks ready to shock us again, only this time with a story that feels bigger, wilder, and far more dangerous. asterisk from the very first frames of the Rio Palo trailer, it becomes clear that this spin-off is not going to waste time easing us in. The story is hinted at through fragmented glimpses, faces filled with grit, land marked by blood, and whispered dialogue that leaves more questions than answers. Taylor Sheridan's genius has always been in crafting narratives that feel both personal and epic, and Rio Palo looks like it carries that same weight. Unlike the power struggles of Yellowstone, which often centered around inheritance and political influence, this new series leans into raw survival and the fragile line between hope and destruction. One of the most striking themes teased in the trailer is the battle for ownership, not just of land, but of identity. We see ranchers riding under scorching sun, their eyes scanning land that seems impossible to tame. There are glimpses of families building homes on fragile soil, only to face rivals who want the same piece of ground. In the West, land isn't just dirt, it's wealth, pride, and a chance at legacy. And Rio Palo makes it clear that owning even a slice of it comes with a price. A quick shot of a burned ranch house tells us everything. This is not a story where victories come without blood, but Rio Palo also seems to dig deeper into the idea of outsiders and belonging. Unlike the Dutton-centered Yellowstone saga, the characters shown in the trailer don't appear to be tied to an already powerful dynasty. Instead, they look like people searching for their place in a hostile world. Some wear ragged clothes, others seem hardened by years of conflict, and a few carry the desperation of those who have lost everything. There's a line in the trailer, faint, almost buried under the music, that says, "This land doesn't want us." That single phrase captures the heart of the story. Rio Palo is about fighting not only other men, but the very earth beneath your feet. Conflict is another theme that pulses through the trailer. Sheridan doesn't show his cards outright, but he gives just enough for fans to speculate. There are gunfights under the desert sky, a tense standoff in what looks like a small wooden church, and a heated argument between two men at a riverside. These scenes point toward rival factions, possibly families, each trying to stake their claim on Rio Palo, yet it doesn't feel like a simple black and white fight between good and evil. Sheridan's shows have always thrived in the gray areas where even heroes are flawed and villains are shaped by pain. Rio Palo appears to follow that same pattern, ensuring every character's struggle feels deeply human. Another powerful theme that emerges is legacy, not in the sense of passing down land, but in the sense of survival shaping generations. The trailer shows a mother clutching her child as fire burns in the distance, a father teaching his son to shoot with trembling hands, and a group of men lowering a coffin into dry, cracked earth. These are not just snapshots of Western life, they're symbols of the sacrifices each generation makes to carve out a future. If Yellowstone was about protecting what the Duttons already had, Rio Palo feels like it's about building something from nothing, with the odds stacked against you. The imagery of water throughout the trailer is especially telling. We see cattle driven toward the river, families gathering around it for moments of peace, and then shots of bodies floating downstream after violence erupts. The river seems to represent both life and death, opportunity and loss. By naming the show Rio Palo, Sheridan makes water central to the story, suggesting that control of this river may be the heart of the conflict. Just as Yellowstone's ranch became sacred ground, Rio Palo's river may become a symbol of survival, a resource that everyone needs, but only one can truly control. Themes of betrayal and trust also weave through the trailer. There's a moment where two men shake hands, only for one to pull away with a look of quiet resentment. Another scene flashes by where a woman whispers urgently into someone's ear before a gunshot cuts the moment short. These hints suggest that Rio Palo isn't just about open battles. It's about the betrayals that happen in the shadows, the ones that destroy families from within. This adds a layer of suspense that could make the series even more gripping. Lastly, the trailer captures the theme of resilience. Sheridan has always portrayed the West not as a backdrop, but as a test. Every character from Yellowstone's John Dutton to 1883's James and Margaret face trials that force them to redefine strength. Rio Palo seems to carry that forward, showing characters who rise despite overwhelming odds. Whether it's a woman standing tall with a rifle as men close in, or a young boy looking determined as he drives cattle across dangerous land, resilience feels like the heartbeat of this story. In the end, the trailer doesn't hand us the full plot, it doesn't need to. Instead, it plants seeds. It shows us enough to understand that this will be a story about survival, about finding meaning in hardship, and about the timeless fight between man, land, and destiny. Just like Yellowstone changed how we see the modern West, Rio Palo looks ready to challenge how we understand its past or perhaps even its forgotten corners. If the trailer is any indication, this series isn't just going to tell a story. It's going to remind us why the West remains one of the most powerful settings for human drama. Asterisk, if Yellowstone taught us anything, it's that characters are the soul of Taylor Sheridan's universe. Every spin-off from 1883 to 1923 introduced figures who felt larger than life, yet flawed enough to feel real. Rio Palo follows that same blueprint, but instead of leaning on the Dutton name, the trailer hints at a brand new lineup of characters ready to carry the story. These faces are unfamiliar, yet their presence is magnetic, and every glance, every gesture, feels like it's hiding a history waiting to be told. The first major figure teased in the trailer is a rugged man on horseback, framed against the blazing sun. His clothes are worn, his hands scarred, and his face tells us he's seen more than his share of loss. We don't yet know his name, but the camera lingers on him long enough to suggest he is the anchor of the story, the kind of character who doesn't speak much but commands respect. Whether he's a rancher trying to stake his claim, or a man running from a troubled past, his role seems tied to the core conflict of Rio Palo. Fans will immediately sense echoes of John Dutton in his stoic strength, but also shades of James Dutton from 1883, suggesting this character could bridge the old world and the new frontier. Dead opposite him, we glimpse a strong female-led woman standing in front of a half-built home, rifle in hand, her jaw set with defiance. In Sheridan's stories, women are never just background figures. They are forces of nature, often carrying the emotional weight of survival. This woman seems no different. One brief shot shows her confronting armed men at her doorstep, and another shows her comforting a child as chaos rages nearby. She could be a widow trying to defend her land, or perhaps the matriarch of a family caught in the middle of Rio Palo's battles. Either way, she radiates resilience, hinting that her journey will intertwine deeply with the show's central themes of family, betrayal, and endurance. The trailer also teases a younger generation. We see a boy, no older than 15, learning to fire a rifle under the stern gaze of his father. His hands shake, but his eyes burn with determination. In another moment, the same boy drives cattle across the river, proving that youth in Rio Palo doesn't mean innocence. It means being thrust into responsibility before you're ready. This character may represent the future of Rio Palo, embodying the idea that survival shapes even the youngest into hardened souls. His journey could mirror the struggles of Dutton in Yellowstone, yet with a far harsher environment to grow up in. On the other side of the conflict, the trailer introduces what appears to be a rival family or faction. We catch sight of a man dressed in black, his hat tilted low, his eyes cold and unyielding. He doesn't need dialogue, his presence screams danger. He rides flanked by armed men, and one scene shows him overseeing a fire that consumes what looks like a rival's home. This antagonist feels like the embodiment of the land's cruelty, a man who doesn't just fight for territory but thrives on domination. In Sheridan's world, villains are never cartoonish. They're shaped by their scars. And this man looks like someone who has learned to survive by crushing anyone in his path. Interestingly, the trailer doesn't just focus on men and their rivalries. There are glimpses of other women who seem poised to play vital roles. One is shown at a church, her hands clasped in prayer as gunfire erupts outside. Another stands at the river's edge, her eyes locked on someone in the distance, her expression unreadable. These moments hint that Rio Palo's women won't just be companions or mothers, they'll be leaders, strategists, and perhaps even betrayers. Sheridan's writing has always elevated female characters into pivotal roles, and Rio Palo looks set to continue that tradition. We also catch fleeting glimpses of supporting figures who could prove essential to the narrative. There's an older ranch hand, his beard gray and his shoulders stooped, who mutters something about the river taking more than it gives. There's a preacher whose fiery sermon echoes over scenes of conflict, suggesting that faith and morality will clash with violence and greed. And there's a native figure standing tall by the riverbank, his expression calm but powerful, as if he knows that this land's story runs far deeper than the newcomers understand. His presence suggests that Rio Palo may explore not only the struggles between settlers but also the clash of cultures, an element that could give the series even greater depth. Casting remains one of the biggest questions around Rio Palo. Sheridan has a history of blending legendary actors with fresh talent. Yellowstone gave us Kevin Costner's gravitas while elevating performers like Kelly Riley into unforgettable icons. 1883 brought Tim McGraw and Faith Hill into gritty, career-defining roles. 1923 showcased Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren, proving that Sheridan's universe attracts Hollywood royalty. Rio Palo could follow this same tradition, mixing seasoned stars with rising actors who embody the rawness of the frontier. But here's what makes Rio Palo different. The trailer deliberately withholds names. Unlike previous spin-offs that leaned heavily on familiar faces to spark excitement, Rio Palo seems determined to let its characters speak for themselves. This is a bold choice, one that signals Sheridan's confidence in the story. By keeping the cast a mystery for now, he invites us to focus not on who is playing the roles, but on the roles themselves, their struggles, their conflicts, and their humanity. At its core, the trailer suggests that Rio Palo will be a story carried by its characters, not its connections. These new faces may not have the Dutton name, but they embody the same resilience, strength, and fragility that made Yellowstone unforgettable. They feel like people ripped out of history, tough, scarred, but still clinging to hope. And if Sheridan's past work is any indication, these characters will quickly become just as iconic as the Duttons themselves. Asterisk every time a new Yellowstone spin-off arrives. The biggest question fans have is always the same. How does this connect to the Duttons? The Yellowstone universe is built like a sprawling family tree, with branches stretching from 1883 to 1923, from the present-day ranch wars of Yellowstone to the gritty tales of 6666. Each show has carried its own voice, but together they weave a single legacy of land, loyalty, and sacrifice. Rio Palo is no exception. The trailer hints that while this story may stand apart in setting and characters, the spirit of Yellowstone flows through it like the river that gives the series its name. At first glance, Rio Palo appears to break away from the Dutton-centered narrative. There's no sign of John Dutton's stern gaze, no Beth Dutton firestorm, and no branded ranch hands spilling blood for Montana turf. Instead, we see a new land and a new set of families locked in their own battles. Yet Yellowstone has taught us that nothing in Sheridan's world exists in isolation. The themes, struggles, and even bloodlines always find a way to connect. The challenge is spotting those subtle threads, and the trailer gives us just enough to begin pulling at them. The most obvious connection comes through legacy land as inheritance. From the very first season of Yellowstone, John Dutton drilled one truth into our minds: the land is everything. It is history, survival, and identity all tied into one. Rio Palo carries that very same heartbeat. Shots of ranch hands driving cattle, families protecting their homesteads, and rivers flowing with both life and death mirror Yellowstone's core theme: the land doesn't belong to you. You belong to it. This shared philosophy ties Rio Palo to Yellowstone without needing direct cameos. It says this is the same fight, just on different soil, but fans are already speculating whether Rio Palo will give us deeper, more literal connections. Could the characters in Rio Palo be distant relatives of the Dutton family? Sheridan has been careful to expand the Dutton family tree in unexpected ways. In 1883, we followed James and Margaret Dutton. In 1923, Jacob and Cara Dutton carried the story forward. Yellowstone itself showed us John, Case, Beth, and Jamie in the modern era. That leaves massive gaps in the timeline gaps Sheridan loves to fill. The clothes, weapons, and tone of Rio Palo suggest a timeline somewhere after 1923 but before the modern series. If that's the case, these new characters could very well be cousins, allies or rivals of the Dutton line, carving out their own destiny in the same harsh West. Another connection lies in the familiar imagery. Yellowstone has always leaned on visuals that feel symbolic: the wide-open pastures, the branding iron, the roaring cattle drives. Rio Palo carries those same visual cues but gives them a new flavor. The trailer shows a branding scene, but instead of the Yellowstone Y, we see an unfamiliar mark pressed into a horse's hide. This could be Sheridan's way of signaling a parallel dynasty, another family whose mark becomes just as feared and respected as the Duttons. It's not the same brand, but it carries the same weight, hinting at a shared tradition of loyalty, violence, and unbreakable oaths. The trailer also teases smaller nods to the Yellowstone timeline. A preacher delivers a fiery sermon about the sins of fathers passing down to sons. This line feels like a callback to John Dutton's own words about legacy and burden. In another scene, a young rancher rides past a weathered sign etched with faint letters, almost unreadable, but fans with sharp eyes swear it looks like a reference to land once connected to the Dutton family. Whether intentional or not, Sheridan loves planting Easter eggs like this, rewarding viewers who pay attention. Then there's the question of tone. Yellowstone and its spin-offs all share an undercurrent of tragedy. No story in this universe ends without sacrifice. Rio Palo's trailer embraces that same DNA. We see characters burying their dead, land consumed by fire, and families torn apart by betrayal. That familiar Sheridan blueprint where loyalty demands blood ties Rio Palo directly to Yellowstone's legacy. It tells us that while the characters may change, the West itself doesn't. It remains unforgiving, punishing, and yet magnetic, pulling people in despite the cost. One of the most intriguing possibilities is how Rio Palo could connect to the 6666 ranch storyline. Yellowstone's own spin-off already teased the idea of expanding southward into Texas, where cowboy traditions run deep and survival is as brutal as ever. Rio Palo, with its more southern landscapes and river imagery, could overlap geographically or thematically with that story. Could Rio Palo characters cross paths with the legendary ranch hands of the 6666? It's not far-fetched. Sheridan has built his universe like a puzzle, and Rio Palo may be a missing piece that bridges Yellowstone's northern ranch wars with the southern cattle empire. Finally, there's the emotional connection. Yellowstone was never just about land or cattle. It was about people who would do anything to protect what they love. Rio Palo, in its trailer, gives us those same emotional stakes. Mothers shielding their children, fathers teaching their sons the cruel rules of survival, and families torn apart by greed and betrayal. These are echoes of the Dutton story, reshaped for a new setting. The connections may not be written in family trees or legal documents, but they're carved into the themes: loyalty, sacrifice, betrayal, survival. The very essence of Yellowstone lives on in Rio Palo. In the end, Rio Palo doesn't need John Dutton to ride into frame or Beth to unleash her fury to prove its place in the Yellowstone universe. The trailer makes it clear the connections are spiritual, thematic, and cultural. It's the same world, the same struggle, told from a new angle. And if Sheridan decides to pull the threads tighter, later revealing family ties, crossover characters, or shared histories, then Rio Palo could become not just a spin-off, but a critical link in the larger Yellowstone saga. For now, the trailer leaves us with just enough mystery. We know Rio Palo belongs to the Yellowstone family, but it's a branch that grows wild, untamed, and ready to carve its own legend.